Okay, so I'm going to get started. So my name is Ross. I'm with the admissions office here. I think I see some familiar faces, so you may know me from some other sessions that we've run over the last few weeks, or if you've been, joining us for events in the past over other years as well. So thank you for joining us today to learn more about application tips, which is a really important topic. I know last week some of you might have attended our session, which is called "What Program is Right for Me," which was more about all the different programs we offer and kind of what they might be suited for in terms of the goals you might have and the background you have. And if you missed that, I'm going to put the link to that in the chat right now, so you can catch up with that conversation, which gives a good grounding in what our different master's programs provide, as well as our doctoral program. So that goes into more detail about program by program, kind of who they're best suited for. So hopefully that'll be of use to you as well as you think about potentially applying to our school this cycle or in a future cycle. But the great thing about having this conversation today about application tips is that it is October 3rd right now, which means there's about roughly 2.5 months to get an application in if you're thinking of doing it this cycle. So it's great to have a conversation about application tips right now because there's a lot of time to take into account all the things I'll discuss, to think about, to plan for. Luckily, our application doesn't require, aside from our doctoral program, a GRE test. So there's not a lot of things you may need to schedule, but you can spend a lot of time just thinking about what we go over today as you put together an application. And I'm happy to kind of go over, what we think are, ways to make your application as strong as possible, depending on which program you're thinking of applying for. So I will go over some of the key highlights of the application process, talking about some best practices for those. And then towards the end of the session, I will open up the chat. So if you have questions you wanted to ask, hold on to those and we'll get to some of your questions there. I'll say it early. Right now, if your question is going to be like 5 paragraphs long in the app in the chat, I probably just won't be humanly able to read all of that if there's many people writing those kinds of questions at the same time. So I'd ask if you have really detailed, specific questions after this kind of conversation to write to us at our apply.journalism@columbia.edu address. I'll put that in the chat later too, and we can kind of get to those more specific situations, specific cases in detail that will be more helpful to you because we'll have that ability to look it over and kind of write back to you with our best kind of advice for whatever that situation might be. But for general questions, I'll be happy to answer those a little later in the chat. So I'm going to share my screen now. Take 1 second here and start our slideshow. So hopefully you can all see this here. This is our school. If you don't know the school, on the lower right corner, Pulitzer Hall. That's where I'm located right now, and that is the home of the journalism school. All 8 floors of it are journalism faculty, studios, offices, basically where the whole kind of community lives and works. Basically, is in this building. So it's a really great, active place day to day. It's very much like a working newsroom in the sense that people are working on journalism of one sort or another, whether it's making documentaries, doing investigative work, doing podcasts, radio shows, broadcast shows, writing magazine articles, whatever it might be. It really has a buzz of coming into a really big news organization when you come into here, and your classmates and your faculty are really your colleagues. So it's a really special place just to give you a sense of where we are and what this school is all about. But today we'll talk more about how to apply so you could potentially become a member of this community in the coming years, if that is a goal of yours. So what we'll go over, I'm going to talk about some of the essential application materials. So things as you open an application to the school, you'll encounter, and tell you a little bit more about, how to navigate all of that, where to upload things properly, how to like prepare things in the best way for those different sections. And then I'll also be talking about some of the key dates. Luckily, there's only really one date to keep in mind this year, so it's a little more streamlined and easy to remember. And I'll go over kind of a lightning round of common questions. And one thing I didn't put in the slideshow here is a key thing just to remember for all of you who are thinking of maybe applying to a degree program at Columbia Journalism School this cycle is that our application fee is waived. So there's no fee to apply to our school. Some schools I know have some sort of just kind of general fee to submit an application. This year, as in last year, it is free of charge. So you're going to be able to apply to our school at no cost. So that's a really great thing we're able to do this year. So no worries about actually, paying a fee to do an application to the school. So here is the application itself. Some of you might already know this by actually opening an app or starting an app, or maybe some of you are close to submitting your app. And so this is what you will see as you kind of get into the application nitty gritty for our school. And you'll see on the left-hand kind of side of this, there's a lot of different sections for your application. So you can navigate that. You can kind of fill those out as you want in terms of like going into which section you want to, kind of complete first. There's not like a order where you have to do each thing, one by one, starting from personal applicant data, education. If there's things you have already that you want to just fill out and get that part done, you can start on whatever section you feel like you'd like to begin with. And you'll see basically that one thing you do need to do, though, in order to populate the essay questions and some of the other requirements is to do your program of interest. So sometimes people write to me and they say, hey, I started my app and I can't find the essays. Where are they? There's no essay prompts. It just is blank. And the reason that'll be if you have that problem is that you haven't already selected your program of interest, which will be over in that section. That's where you would say Master of Science program, Master of Arts program, Master of Science in Data Journalism, doctoral program in communications, whatever it might be. And what will happen is once you select your program, that will then have our application logic then give you the questions, the essays, the requirements that are connected specifically to that program. So that's the first thing you'll need to do in order to be able to do several other kind of key things for your app, like put in the essays and get the instructions for other sections of the application. And so I was talking about essays. So once you do select your program, you'll see that there are some essays that are going to be required. Every application has some essential essays that'll be part of it. For anyone applying to a master's degree at our school, whether it's the MS, the MA, the MS in data journalism, the dual MS in journalism and computer science, whatever that might be, there's at least going to be two essays we're going to ask of everybody. And those are, as you see here, autobiographical essay, 750 word maximum for that, and a professional essay, also 750 words maximum. So those are things you can do, fill out in a Microsoft Word file, a Google Doc, whatever it is that you're comfortable using, and you can export a document, upload that into the application when you're ready to do it. These are, I'd say, some of the more important things in your application. I'll talk more in detail about some of the things you should really focus on, but suffice it to say, these are like the key things, even more than, say, GPAs, test scores, all of that. The essays are a really great way to get a sense on, what's your motivation for coming here, what is compelling about Columbia Journalism School and the program you're applying to for you. So these are really good places to kind of spend a good amount of your time prepping, thinking what you want to craft for your essays. For the PhD in Communications program, there is also a personal statement we ask, which is also similar to a autobiographical essay, 750 word maximum, and more of an academic interest essay, 750 word maximum for that too. The doctoral program is an academic program. We talk about that a bit in the What Program is Right for Me session I did last week, and you can see video of exactly how those programs differ. But the doctoral program really is going to be an academic program, so we'll want to know about your interest in certain academic topics and your kind of academic ambitions in a PhD application. Now, there's also a third essay for some people who may be applying to our programs. These are for people who will be applying to a specialized or kind of focused journalism master's degree program that we offer. And those include the MS documentary specialization, the MS investigative specialization, the MS in data journalism, the dual MS in journalism and computer science, and the MA program, which has concentrations this year in politics and arts and culture. We'll want to know if you're applying to any of those specialized programs, what is the reasoning that you feel like you'd really like to focus your time at Columbia on that specific area of journalism. And these would also be no more than 750 words in terms of what you're writing for that essay. So if you do select in your program of interest one of these programs, you'll see there'll be a third prompt to provide more information about your particular reason to want to spend kind of more of your time really, honing a real craft or a real subject related kind of mastery at the school in one of these specialized programs. And then, so here's the thing I mentioned already. So just so you see it visually, for the blank essays, I got ahead of myself a little talking about that. But in the essay section, you see it's blank here when you haven't selected a program. And first, you'll need to go over to this area here, program of interest, and then the drop down will be there. And that's where you'll select a program, the program I think that you'll likely apply to, and that will then make the other things pop up for your application, your essay prompts, and the rest of it. And here are just some other key things to think about. Work samples. These are essential application materials for everyone applying to our schools. For applicants to our MS programs, we're going to ask for 3 work samples total. And that could include written clips or multimedia samples, but no more than 3 total. It could be 3 written samples. It could be 3 multimedia. It could be 1 multimedia and 2 written. There's not a specific order, but we ask for just 3 samples total, whether they are of one kind of format or another. So if you're applying to our MS program, as you might have learned in our earlier session, the MS program does not require that you have a journalistic background to apply to it. So that means that we know that there are some people out there who maybe have no journalistic work to show us yet. And that's okay. If you do have journalistic work, say you've worked for your campus newspaper, magazine, you've worked for an audio channel at your school, or you've also maybe interned at a local newsroom over your summer break, or worked professionally as a journalist, definitely use your journalistic samples in that case. But these can be either journalistic work samples or from other contexts. So if you're, say, an MS applicant new to journalism, you could upload, say, a section of a academic research paper you did, or an essay you did, or some sort of professional work you've done. Say you work for a company or a nonprofit and you did some sort of big report and you want to share that, or an analytical piece that you did for a workplace or some sort of other communication. You can include that. So they don't have to be published as journalistic samples in order for them to be considered as a work sample for the MS programs. What we look for, I guess, if you're asking then, if you're not providing journalistic samples, or even if you are, you're kind of asking, what are we looking for? We're going to look for the quality of the writing and the analysis in whatever the kind of work sample you're providing. And so whether it's a journalistic sample or an academic sample, I would say include maybe the samples you feel like show you at your kind of highest level of kind of writing, communication, and analytical thought. So if you're like working through a complex issue in your writing, you're doing a lot of research to like show some understanding of something pretty complicated, I would include that. We don't require that they be the most recent work that you've done. So if you have something you did like last month that you think is pretty good, but you did something like 2 years ago that you're really proud of, I would include the one from 2 years ago. Sometimes you have something really recent you're really proud of, that would be great too. But there's no like penalty for someone who like provides a work sample from a few years back if it's something that really shows your work at kind of the highest level, I would say. Now, if you do have a multimedia sample, you can upload that to the multimedia clip section. We ask though if people probably work on some longer multimedia projects. Oftentimes, things that can be a little bit over 10 minutes. People have longer broadcast clips. They have maybe longer podcast or radio clips they've done. We ask that if you have something kind of longish, to give us maybe just an excerpt of that, of maybe no more than 3 minutes, because of just the time the admissions committee will have to review your work. So we'd love to listen or watch something that's 20 minutes, 30 minutes long, but we can't do that for everybody. It would just take too much time to be able to kind of review things of that kind of length. So we ask 3 minutes. I know that's kind of tough sometimes, but I would include, if you need to, maybe an excerpt that shows a really great interview section of whatever it might be, a podcast or a short documentary, or if it's a really good visual piece, if you're applying, say, to our documentary program and you want to show us some really great footage you created of something, that would be great too. If you don't want to edit it, or you feel like you're just going to give people the longer clip, that's fine. Just imagine that probably our admissions committee will not have the time to go beyond 3 or so minutes, so they may have to turn off whatever that sample is 3 or more minutes into it. So if you want to make sure they see something or listen to something really important to you about that clip, I would excerpt that yourself, so they'll get that without necessarily risking the chance that they might turn off the larger piece before you get to that moment you really want them to hear or listen to, hear or watch, I mean. Now, for any written samples, we ask that you select no samples that are multiple byline pieces. So we know that you've probably, in some cases worked on a really interesting journalistic or academic work with some collaborators who have like bylines on this piece as well. I'm sure that's really great and you did a great job on that, but we ask for the things that you do select to provide as your samples be single authored, in the sense that your byline is the only byline on it, whether that's a journalistic piece for like a newspaper or magazine, or for like an academic piece. And that's fine. It's fine though if you have like an editor. Sometimes people ask like, well, I wrote this piece for my campus newspaper. Sent it to my editor and they made a few tweaks. Does that count as like having a collaborator? In that case, no. If someone like edited your piece for publication, that's fine. But if someone else was like a co-bylined writer or kind of reporter or kind of author on that, we would say not to include that in terms of what you would select for your samples. If it's in another language, your clips, whatever they might be, you need to translate those into English. You can do that yourself. You don't need to necessarily have some sort of, real agency doing that. That has to be like vetted. It can be yourself. So if you'd say in Spanish or in Korean or whatever language it might be, you can make your own translation, whether it's a written piece that you're providing, or if to say there's an audio clip or a video clip you did in another language, you can upload a written version, or sorry, a written transcript of the kind of the English like dialogue, and just upload that into the written samples to accompany that foreign language piece for us. And people always ask, what's the maximum in terms of the pages that you can provide for the samples? For all three work samples total, if they're all written, we ask that they be no more than 15 pages combined, so 15 pages total. So one piece could be, 6 pages, another could be 4, and the other one 5. That's fine. We just ask that all together, when you like combine all of those, they don't go over 15 pages. We don't have a font, style guide in terms of what is like required, but we do ask that you be kind of like appreciative of like maybe the kind of the ability for people to read, clips on like a tablet or a computer, which is where a lot of people will be reviewing applications. So things that are like very small font, very dense writing, no space between like the lines, would not be appreciated. So just being aware that we would appreciate probably a font around like 12 points or something like that. It's not a requirement. And if you can do some spacing that makes it easier to read, that would be great too. Sometimes people have work samples that are from like a published place, like an online site where, you might need to, you can like print to PDF and you could just, upload that, document that you kind of downloaded as a PDF from the news site, if that's convenient for you. Sometimes I know when I've done that, sometimes there's like some weird formatting because there's some pop-up ad or a banner ad that gets in the way and it gets all kind of gummed up. So if it looks like the formatting is really screwy, if you download like a work sample that way, you can just like basically copy the text that's in that piece and maybe just paste it into a Word document and upload that and say this is available. Like you can read this also at this URL. If it turns out it's a little hard to format the piece as you download it from like a website, so that's another way to work around that if that's an issue. Now, for applicants to our Master of Arts program, and as people who went to our session last week, What Program is Right for Me would know, the MA program is one that is for experienced journalists who can show that they've done professional journalism already. So for the MA program, we ask that you do 3 work samples as well, but it should be the same parameters in terms of the length, but we ask that they should likely be published journalistic work, either by a professional outlet or by a campus publication. So the MA will be looking for work samples that are really published journalistic work, or broadcast journalistic work. Whereas the MS, you could definitely have a lot of great journalism in there, but we're open to looking at more different context work samples like academic papers or professional work that's outside of journalism. Now, for applicants of the doctoral program in communications, we ask for 2 academic work samples for that. And those should be no more than 15 to 20 pages each sample. And that should likely be scholarly writing since that's a scholarly program. So essays, research papers you did in college or in another graduate program, that's what we likely look for. But if you've done like some substantial journalism, if you're coming from a background in journalism, you may be able to upload those as samples too. And you can also make those excerpts because we know sometimes in some very ambitious kind of programs that you may be in, you've already published like an 80-page research paper. We won't be able to read that either. So I would say excerpt that down to like 15 or 20 pages from that, and you can explain if there's more in that kind of in that piece that we're not able to see, kind of what the rest of the project will be about. Since 80 pages, 50 pages will be too many pages for admissions committee to review for a doctoral application. And for what you might think about for the academic work sample, they should display your analytical skills for sure, as well as your writing craft. So whatever you're exploring in your research or your kind of analysis, things you're really proud of in terms of just the ambition of the piece and kind of the challenge of doing it. I would include those that you felt were the most challenging and the work of academic kind of research that you're most proud of for the doctoral program work samples. Okay, and on to another key thing for our applications. You need to have three letters of recommendation for any of these programs. So whether you're applying to an MS, MA, doctoral program, we want to have three letters of recommendation. The cool thing is that you can get this process started as early as today if you haven't done it already. So you can identify your letter writers, and get them started in this process as early as today, next week, this weekend, whenever you feel like it. It's always good to get started as soon as possible when it comes to the letters of recommendation process, in my opinion. And I'll kind of reiterate that a little later as we go over some tips. But just to know, if you're fewer than 5 years out of your last academic degree program, whether that's a bachelor's degree program, master's degree program, another doctoral program, a medical degree program, whatever it might be, please select at least one academic recommendation writer in that case. So if you're fewer than 5 years out of your last degree, we'll want to see at least one letter writer who's an academic, whether they're a professor or some sort of academic supervisor you had in your university or your college. Please do not get letters from your colleagues or family friends. Sometimes people do that. They have, somebody who says, "Oh yeah, I've known this family for a long time, and so is a really great applicant." Well, I'm sure that's, very true and honest evaluation of someone's potential, but we really want to have somebody who is more of a either academic or professional supervisor for who would be writing letters for you. We would say we definitely choose people who have had the opportunity to evaluate your work. So that would be, again, managers, supervisors, professors, whether it's in the academic or work setting, and can write about your potential to succeed at Columbia. We often get a lot of questions from people saying, I have a really great recommendation writer that I'm thinking of, but they're not a journalist. They don't teach journalism. Is that okay? Totally fine. We want to see, their understanding of you and your potential to do well at our school, even if they don't, necessarily work in the world of journalism. And as I mentioned earlier, I always love to kind of just underscore this. Select your letter writers as soon as possible so they will have more time to write your letters. Our application is due in December. Sometimes people do wait, until end of November, early December to kind of ask, somebody to do a letter. And it might work out, but it's usually pretty stressful for you and for them because you have to kind of keep on top of them to get it done. Say, can you get this done? Can you get this done? Oh yeah, I see you haven't done it yet. Can you do it? And it gets stressful for them. And as you might imagine, at the end of the kind of calendar year, there's a lot of holidays coming up. There's also the end of semesters for faculty. You might be asking to do it, so it gets pretty stressful at that time of year. Maybe to have somebody kind of start this process, at that moment. So I'd say you could do it, as early as October, November. Get that started, and as it will work in the application is that you will put the name of the recommender, their title, and you'll be able to put in their email contact address. And what will happen is our system will then email them the instructions to do the recommendation and the instructions for how to upload it to your application file. So you won't have to be a middle person responsible for that. They will be doing that themselves, but they can get the instructions, get started as early as today if you want that to start now. We ask that you use their institutional email addresses when you do put their names in. So if they work for a university, they work for a company, we ask that you use that particular .edu or .com address for them. Sometimes we know that you have recommenders who maybe are retired or they're freelance people or they have their own company or whatever it might be, and they only have, say, a Gmail or a Hotmail or an AOL.com mail, whatever it might be. That's okay. So it's not going to be like not allowed, but we ask if you have somebody who does have an institutional affiliation that they, are contacted through their institutional email address. That makes it easier for us just to vet that these people are, authentically the people who work for these organizations that they say they are. So that's something we would ask for the letters of rec. And again, they are people that have had a good, exposure to you, whether it's academically or professionally, and can write with detail. Sometimes people, every year I would say choose somebody maybe they have a passing acquaintance with, but they are maybe well known, whether that's in a professional setting or in an academic setting. Say they had a really famous professor who's like won a lot of awards, everyone knows who they are, but the class you were in was like 180 people, and maybe you didn't really go to office hours with that person, but you got an okay grade, and you want to ask them to do it because we might recognize that name. But if that person really doesn't have much to say in terms of detail about your potential, your kind of interaction with them in class, then that's not really helpful to us. So we definitely would include people who are the most aware of your kind of abilities and had the chance to kind of talk back and forth with you, advise you, see your work, and can talk with the most detail in their letter about why you would be a good fit for the program you're applying for. So definitely go with that as opposed to a big name without much exposure to you, whether it's academically or professionally. Essential application materials continued. We talk about resumes now. So for applicants to any of our programs, we ask for a resume. So that's pretty straightforward. We ask that it be probably no more than 2 pages. I know people sometimes like to do a lot of exhaustive listing of everything they've done up till now in their resume, but we think that it's more helpful to be a little bit more distilled down to maybe your key academic and professional highlights now, whether it's jobs, internships, degrees you've earned, certain projects you've worked on, any kind of awards or fellowships or things you might have received. Definitely include those. There's no specific format that we ask for. If people ask, is there a font or a style? But as I mentioned earlier about the work samples, we ask that you kind of just be, aware that it's going to be hard to read something that's really small font, really dense, really kind of complex in how it's organized. So I'd say the more straightforward, the clearer it is, making it legible with a font that's easy, again, on the eyes to see and not a font that's too small would be really appreciated, although we don't have a standard format that we do enforce at all. So thinking about that, just make it, easy to read, understand, and, something that is just a good representation of your core kind of academic professional highlights up to now. And then we get into another essential application material, which is academic transcripts. And sometimes this becomes a little bit of a headache for people, but if you get started on this, it shouldn't be a problem since we are in October and there's a lot of time to get transcripts, hopefully together to put in your application. So for everyone applying, we will need all transcripts of your academic work at the college level or above. So that means like we don't need your high school transcripts or anything like that, but everything at like the bachelor's or its equivalent level and above. And that means it could include if people have done summer programs at other universities, graduate programs beyond your undergraduate work, and maybe schools that you attended but did not earn a degree at. Sometimes people transfer from a school to another. That's very common, but we'll want to see the transcripts from all those programs if you have multiple ones in your background. So that's something we get questions about. People will be like, I took a summer program in France just for one class. Is that something I need to provide for a transcript? And the answer will be yes. So you can just be assured that we will want to see all of those transcripts, even if it's for just one little course. There's a one exception. If you do have like a larger bachelor's transcript, that it has credits and grades from like a summer course that's been like inputted onto that larger transcript, that should be fine. So if you did like you went to some university and you did another program elsewhere for a summer, but your larger university transcript has the grades from that summer course on there, then that would be fine. You wouldn't need to hunt down the summer program transcript. However, you just have the credits there. It says like credits provided or like transfer credits. That will not be sufficient. So we'll want to get a real document that shows the marks you received, the grades you received in that program. So if you don't have that on your transcript, you'll need to get that from that separate program. Copies are sufficient for these transcripts, which means that you can have these in your possession right now. You won't need to contact anyone else to get them if you have them already. A lot of you maybe have gotten, a version of your transcript from your registrar when you finished your program, whether it's a PDF or a scan or like a real physical document that you've taken a photo of. So you can use those and upload those into our application, and you won't need to have necessarily official versions for application purposes. We will need those official versions. However, if you are admitted, which would be great, and if you choose to enroll, which would also be great, but at that point in the summer between, getting admitted, deciding to come, and then actually enrolling here, we would actually need those official versions, which means those schools would need to send those directly to our university. And so it would be something that you wouldn't be able to be the person who has the copy that's provided at that point. But for all admissions purposes, it can be a copy that you have and you provide yourself into the application. And you can upload those directly into the application. I'll show you how in a moment. It's pretty straightforward. straightforward, although it's a little hidden in the way that our application is formatted. So hopefully you will be able to do that after you get a little more tips from me about how to do it easily. And if you do need to have like an official version sent to us, say you don't have anything in your possession and you'd rather just have the school you attended send it directly to us, you will need to have the e-transcript sent to us specifically to the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia or our email address, which is apply.journalism@columbia.edu as the recipient, not other Columbia graduate or undergraduate schools or to the general Columbia University kind of option, because we won't receive the transcripts if they're sent to other schools within the Columbia network or even to just the name Columbia University in general. It has to be specifically sent or directed to the Columbia Graduate School or to that particular email address, apply.journalism@columbia.edu, in order for us to be able to get it. So that happens every year. Someone sends it to the wrong school. They think we're all, very, familiar with each other. Unfortunately, it's a big university. So if you do send it to the wrong school, we'll need to have you send it again to us. We won't be able to track that down from other units of the university. So here's where you can actually upload the transcript. I mentioned it's a little tricky to find. But when you're in the education section of your application, you'll see this area called Add Institution. This is where you'll be listing all of the college level and above schools you've attended. You'll put in the name, the degree, the dates attended for whatever that university or college is. And then and associated with that, you'll see a pop-up with that school. It's in the Add Institution area. And as you scroll all the way down, there's all this stuff in red font you'll see. And finally, when you get to the bottom, you'll see this area where you can upload the actual transcript copy if you have that. So if you have a PDF or scanned pages you want to just upload, you would say choose file, and then there you would upload the document associated with whatever that school is. So if you went to University X and you have your University X transcript already on hand, you can put in the name of that University X, put the degree name, dates attended, and as you get this pop-up, you can choose the file, upload the University X transcript there, and save it, and it should be in your file, and you're done with that. If you do need to get them from other schools, as I mentioned, you can have those routed to us to the apply.journalism@columbia.edu address. And make sure you put all of the schools in here. As I mentioned, we want to see all the academic work you've done at the college level or above. So again, if you transferred schools, if you did a summer program, you did like, some degree that you didn't finish completely, that's not a problem, but we just want to make sure that's all exhaustively put into the Add Institution. So if you have one institution, some of you do, you just went to one school, got a bachelor's, you're done. But if you do have multiple schools you've attended at college or graduate level, please make sure you do that thoroughly and put them all in there. And all the names should pop up for the different universities as you go through the institutional, add institutional area there for that. So it should be hopefully a straightforward process there too. Sometimes people ask about foreign language transcripts. That's, not an uncommon thing since we have a very international applicant pool for our school. If you have a transcript that has, it's say in another language, but there is a kind of a side-by-side English language version of that, that's fine. If there's like a version where you have the foreign language version and this like a supplement that is the English language kind of equivalent explanation of the marks and the degree, you can upload that and you're done. If something is fully in another language, there's no English language, description of it or kind of equivalence in the document you have in your possession, you may need to then reach out to WES, the World Educational Services Credential Evaluation Services, which would then make an English language evaluation and kind of transcription of it into English if you have nothing that has English language equivalency provided in the document itself. So that would be an option in that case if you need to do that. And then we also have some English language tests that we may require in certain cases from applicants. Those would be the TOEFL or the IELTS that we require for people, and I'll explain the scenarios where you may need to have those scores. Sometimes people ask about other types of tests that are out there for language understanding, say like Duolingo or things like that, which are getting more popular. At this time, we only accept TOEFL or IELTS. So if you have a Duolingo, we won't be able to accept that or other types of tests that maybe are popular right now. We just would be asking for those two tests in terms of what we would be needing to look at. So if you haven't taken a TOEFL or IELTS and you've done another type of test, you would need to do a TOEFL or IELTS in order to be, submitting a test score to us. So for people applying to our master's degrees, those are the MS degrees and our MA degree, the TOEFL or the IELTS score will be required if English is not your native language. And that is kind of a full stop. I know that's going to be a good number of people maybe who are applying to the school, even if you've studied previously with English language instruction. So that means that even if you've studied, say, at a college in the US or the UK or Australia or Canada, or whatever it might be, and your language is in English, we'll still need a TOEFL or IELTS score. And if you're applying to the master's programs. And if you are English is your native language, but more than 1 year of your undergraduate degree was not conducted in English, like totally like in another language, we would also ask for a TOEFL or IELTS. And the minimum scores we look for are 114 for the TOEFL and 8 for the IELTS. We know that sometimes there are people who have scores that are a little, not quite at that level, but close, maybe within a few points of that. We would say you can definitely apply. Don't feel discouraged to apply if you say have like 111 TOEFL or a 7.5 IELTS. Still apply. We could ask, if you feel like you want to take the test again to get maybe a possibly higher score, to maybe retake it if you have the time to do it. But I would say if you're not, fully at that minimum, but you're close, I would say continue your application and submit the scores, even if they're like, say, 111 or 7.5 for IELTS. For the PhD applicants out there, there's an important distinction. Here we ask that you do a TOEFL or IELTS if English is not your native language, and if you did not receive your entire undergraduate education in English language instruction. So it's a little more loose in some ways. You can definitely apply if say you if English is not your native language, but you did do an undergraduate degree in a English. Sorry, English. I'm having a little uh, mouth problem here. English language university. You can do that. The minimum is again 114 TOEFL and 8 IELTS for the PhD as well. And then we have a GRE point to make here. Really important is to remember when the GRE is required for applicants to the master's degree programs, MS, MA, any of them. GRE is not required or considered. So don't worry about the GRE. Don't take it if you don't need to for the master's degree applicants out there. We don't review it. It's not required at all by the program. So if you're not taking it for any other reason, don't schedule a GRE test. Now, for PhD applicants, there is an important distinction to remember, which is that the GRE is required for all PhD in communications applicants, and that the school code to reference is 2120 when you're doing the GRE. That is a firm requirement now for the PhD program. So anyone who's thinking of that program, you can schedule your GRE if you haven't taken it yet. We don't have a minimum score in mind for that, but we ask that people do submit their scores. And you can take that up to basically the deadline for the application, which is going to be mid-December. So if you need to take a GRE, make sure that's scheduled this month or probably November in order to get those scores into the school for your application. All right, and then another key thing for anyone applying to our Master of Science programs and to anyone who's going to be applying to our MA program but is marking the box to also be considered for the MS program, there's something called the writing test. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about this or seen the name and maybe worried a little bit like, oh, I have to take a test, or are kind of a little nervous about what I need to prep for this test. Hopefully, after I discuss it, it'll be a little less intimidating because it is pretty straightforward and hopefully not something that you'll feel like will be something to stress out about in terms of the application process, because it's not going to be a test in the way of kind of a traditional test. And I'll talk a little bit more about how it is different and how we look at this. But the way to be able to take the test, it's a little easier this year. If people have started our application in the past, it was a little more of a complicated process to get your writing test, but this year we've streamlined it a bit. So in our application, if you've marked, again, in your program of interest area, a Master of Science program, or indicated in your MA application you want to be considered for the MS, you'll find an area on the left-hand menu of options, the writing test, pop up. And you will be able to click on that, and you'll see the instructions to schedule and take the writing test right away. And you can basically schedule that test as soon as now. So there's no need to wait if you don't want to. You'll be able to take this up until December 15th. So there are many dates to do it. You can schedule it now for a date later on. So if you want to schedule today, October 3rd, and say, I'm going to schedule it though for November 5th, you can do that. You can put in a date like that. And there'll be a lot of different dates, a lot of times. We know a lot of people are going to be taking taking the writing test in different parts of the US and different parts of the world where people may be asleep right now. And traditionally, so there will be time zones that will be understood that you'll be in that it will have test taking times that'll be convenient. So you don't have to stay up all night or wake up super early to take a session of this. There'll be many, many options for when you can take the writing test. And the way to schedule it is actually if you see the red arrow on the screen, there's an area that says 5 steps to student success guide when you open this area. And you'll actually click on that. There'll be a PDF document that'll pop up there, and there'll be hyperlinks for how to actually schedule and set up your account to take the exam. And it's all right there. And that's how you'll do it. You'll just click through that document and do the steps that are indicated there in the instructions. And you can schedule your exam again as early as today if you want to, and just get that out of the way. If for some reason you'll be, having something come up, like a health issue or work issue or something just comes up, you have to travel when you were planning to take the test, you can cancel your session and then, set up a new session time. So you can reschedule if it's important to do that. So don't feel like you're obliged to necessarily take it on the date you've already, set it for. You can change that up as long as it's not at the last minute in December. So totally cool if you need to reschedule for whatever reason. And what you'll need to just think about for the writing test is that it is something that is going to be administered by this proctoring service called ProctorU, and that'll be part of those instructions there. They will run kind of the interfacing for the writing test. And what they'll do is they will require that you'll have a computer that you'll be on that will be maybe the one you're on right now. As long as it has a camera and an audio kind of facility on there, it'll be fine. And what they will do is make sure with their kind of camera kind of setup is make sure that you're not using any resources outside of yourself to take the writing test. And they'll make sure that you're also not on your desktop using any other types of software to help you take the test, such as ChatGPT or any of these other cool things that are out there to help people, write or take tests that are, easy to kind of take advantage of. This will be just an organic, test taking experience where you're going to be writing without any aid of any other type of resources or materials. But luckily, as I was saying, this is not going to be something to stress out about in terms of prepping for. You won't need materials that you should have kind of on hand to take this test because it's not going to ask you to answer kind of questions about the news or about journalistic practice. It won't be some sort of gotcha test to be like, what happened in the U.S. Congress yesterday, or who is this prime minister? It will not be that kind of thing that's going to be like, designed to test your knowledge of, current events. That's not what this is about. What it will be a couple open-ended questions, usually I think 2 this year, where you'll be able to kind of be given a prompt and kind of write up your response to how you would approach these situations. There's no right answer. There's no trick questions. People shouldn't feel like there's something we're kind of putting in there to see if you're going to make a mistake. It's very straightforward and transparent. And you should have 1 hour to take it. So 60 minutes to do these 2-question kind of answers. Maybe just a couple paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, something like that in terms of your response. They don't need to be exhaustive essays in terms of what you're writing in your responses. And what we look for is just your ability to think through a situation and write up your thoughts clearly and provide them to us. So again, that's all it's really about. So don't overthink it. It should be something where you can, just take your time to like look at what the prompt is, think about it for a minute or two, and then kind of write out your thoughts, and then do the next one for the next question, and maybe have a few minutes then just to kind of go back and maybe edit your response a little bit, make it a little clearer, organize your thoughts better if you feel like you want to do that. But you should have enough time, hopefully, to do that and not feel like you're rushed through it. And people can just take their time and provide their kind of own answers to the situation. Again, it's not scored, so there's not like 100 points possible, and we're deducting points for X or Y reasons, so you don't have to worry about that as being kind of part of how we evaluate it. Well, what will happen is we'll take the kind of the writing test that you provide, the answers you provide, and look at them holistically with the rest of the application. So there's again no like a big stress on this test as kind of the make it or break it part of your application. We just want to see how you think and how you are able to clearly provide your thought process to us in writing without the aid of all these things that are out there like ChatGPT or Grammarly or whatever it might be. It's just going to be your ability to write to us with clarity. Is what we're looking for here. So please, don't take too much time worrying about this. Schedule it maybe for a day when you're not too busy, when you're kind of relaxed, and that should be fine. That's all we would say in terms of just what we'd advise for taking the writing test. And again, you can take it as soon as next week. You can take it as late as the mid-December. I'd say it's a nice thing to get done as early as you can too, kind of like the recommendation letter, so you're not having this thing kind of hovering over you that you still have to schedule and take and worry about kind of other things going on during the time you're taking the test. So I'd say, if there's a time you already know you'll be less busy and you want to schedule it, whether it's a weekend or like an afternoon one day or a morning one day or an evening, whenever it might be, just schedule that now, get it set, and you can take it and kind of have this part done and not have to, again, have to think about, when do I still need to schedule this? Oh, I still have to do that, at the last minute. Make it as kind of stress-free as possible, this process, and maybe take the writing test in November or even late October if you'd like. Great. And here are some other clips, other things to think about when it comes to putting together a strong application. I mentioned a lot of these kind of a bit as I went over the aspects of the app earlier, so I'll kind of repeat myself a bit, I bet. But the things, as I was saying earlier, were focus on your essays, especially, whether the autobiographical one or the professional one or a specialization one. Let us know why the specific degree program that you're applying for is the right fit for your goals. Because we know that this is a short program here. All of our master's programs are no more than 2 years long. Most of them are just one academic year. So you won't be able to kind of change your major here in the way that you can in college. So we want to make sure that, if you're applying to our MS program, that you're really interested in getting a wide range of reporting and storytelling experience. If you're applying to a specialized program, that you're really interested in doing investigative or documentary work or data work at a high level, because we want to make sure that if you come here, that the fit is right, that you won't be, unhappy because you actually realize this isn't what you want to do. So we want to know from those essays about your kind of logic and your motivation for coming to the program that you've applied for. If you're new to journalism, we have career changers, people who have studied other things. We'll want to know a bit about why you're drawn to journalism now. It's totally, again, fine if you've been a teacher or working at a nonprofit or working in banking or you were a classics or a chemistry major before. That's totally cool for our MS applicants. But let us know, like, what is it about journalism that's really appealing to you? And if you're applying to our master's programs, why you really want to have a very hands-on professional training experience here, because you're going to be sent out in our master's programs, no matter which one it is, into New York City to do reporting from week one through your graduation date. So you're going to be really busy working as a real journalist. And even if that's a new experience for you, why does that seem appealing to you? We'll want to know a little bit about that, about your kind of thought process about why that would be the case. And if you're doing your autobiographical essay, as you can see, it's 750 words maximum for that. So you don't have the chance to write like an exhaustive life history there. So we'll want to kind of get a sense on something you really want to convey to us about yourself that we wouldn't maybe know from your professional or academic kind of highlights. So what are some maybe experiences, issues, individuals, or works of journalism that have shaped or motivated you? We kind of want to know what makes you tick, what, has been, something that is meaningful to you in your life. It'll give us a sense of who you are, give us a sense of your voice, because we won't be able to interview all of our applicants face to face. So it's great to be able to chat one-on-one. I've done that with some applicants, who've set up appointments in the past, but we won't make that part of the application process. So this is a great way for you to tell us just a bit about, what you want us to know about, things that really are meaningful to you, that we wouldn't necessarily, again, know from just the, where you've worked, where you've studied, any of that stuff. And again, I repeating myself a bit, but for the recommendation letters, choose recommenders who know you well. So again, people who have detailed knowledge of your work and your potential to do well at our school. And you can definitely select and notify your recommenders as early as possible. Again, just saying that again, I know I repeat myself, but it is really nice to be able to get that part kind of settled early and kind of move on to other parts of your application. And then for the work samples, again, choose those wisely. Again, choose the ones that show your depth of analysis and your writing and storytelling skills at a high level. And especially if you're applying to the MA program, we'll want to see kind of the depth of your reporting. So choose clips for the MA for sure that have more complex storytelling in them, where you have multiple sources, maybe some more research woven into your reporting. That would be really helpful for an MA application. And again, don't worry if your strongest pieces are 2 years old or 2 weeks old. It doesn't matter the kind of recency of the piece that you're providing. Just choose the ones that you feel like were the most challenging, the most ambitious, the ones that you'd be most proud of if you showed them to somebody. Now, for the key submission dates, easy to remember, I hope for everybody, December 15th for all the degree programs that are out there right now. So that's the MS, MA, doctoral program, data program, and the dual degree with computer science and journalism. So plenty of time where we are today. If you're watching a video of this later, probably still a good amount of time, hopefully, if you're not turning this video on December 14th. So for people now, 2.5 months basically to get everything together, all the materials submitted. So please, take your time, think about all the advice that I've given, And, reach out to us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu if you have questions as you're kind of going through the process of applying, or come to our other webinars that we're going to have about the degree programs and talk about them in more detail, including one we're having next week about the MS program and about the data and dual degrees next week. So lots of chances to hear more, understand the programs better, maybe before you apply. So again, take your time and especially craft those essays over some time. Take some time maybe to write a draft and, maybe do some revisions of that as you kind of think more about what you want to do here. Because there's no rolling up admissions. So if you don't submit your application until December 15th, that's okay. If you submit it next week, that's great. It's done. You're done with that. And, it's something you don't have to think about for a bit and you can relax. But we won't be evaluating applications until after December 15th for anybody. So we won't make decisions on applications until everybody submitted their apps in December. So there's no rush to get your application in. If you want to do it early, that's great, but there's no advantage in terms of admissions, in terms of getting an application in before December 15th. And here are some of the rapid fire common application questions. I'm sure a lot of you may have some of these as you're kind of thinking about questions to ask in this session. So I'll probably answer a good amount of them right now, and then we can get into some other questions maybe that we didn't get into in a few minutes. So here's one. Why can't I apply to several Columbia Journalism School programs at once? So that's a good question. We get that oftentimes during the year. People want to say, can I apply to like 2 or 3 programs at the Columbia Journalism School this cycle? And we say no, and for good reason. The reason is not just because it's more to like evaluate, but because we really want to look at the fit between you and the program you're applying for. So if you're applying to multiple programs, that gives us some doubt about whether you know what the right fit is for you. And that's not a great look in a sense in terms of applying to a program. So if you are really passionate about documentary and you want to go into that and you're applying to that program, apply to that program. Don't apply to the documentary program and the investigative program and the dual degree and whatever it might be, because that will make us wonder, like, well, what do they really want to do? That I guess they're not sure. The nice news, as I talked about in the session last week about what program is right for me, is that the Master of Science, the broader full-time or part-time program, is very broad in its curriculum. So you can explore multiple areas of journalism in the broader MS, including data, investigations, shorter documentaries, writing, broadcast, audio. It all lives in the MS program. So if you haven't decided yet what you want to do, you can apply to the broader MS. You don't need to declare like a major or have a focus that you've already kind of identified to apply to it. But if you are passionate about a certain area, including data, investigations, or documentary, apply to that particular program, and that will, show us that you have a strong sense of what you want to do here. Applying to multiple programs means that, yeah, you're not certain yet. That's okay. You should review all our programs, talk to us before you submit an application. But we really want to make sure we admit people for the right fitting program for them. So having one application that shows that they're really sure that this program is the right fit is a really good way to kind of convey that to us, that you've thought about it and you've decided one thing that we offer is the thing that makes sense for you at this point in your career. So again, one application for a degree program per cycle. People often ask what makes for a strong Master of Science application. So that Master of Science program, as we went over last week, and as I kind of said a little bit earlier, is a program that can take people who have journalism experience into it. A lot of people have some journalism experience, whether it's at the college level or professional level, but it also will welcome people who are coming from new backgrounds, people who have worked in other fields or have studied other things. So it does start from scratch for our training. So it's a pretty big tent program in terms of who comes into it every year. Some people new to journalism, some people with some background in it. But we want to know in people who are applying to the MS program that they're really interested, as I said earlier, in doing some really hands-on training in journalism, professional training, meaning they're going to go out into New York City and report on various beats, various topics, talk to strangers all the time, learn, to use audio, video, photo equipment, data software to do storytelling, and basically be treated like a journalist. So we want to know in the application to the MS program that whether you're into journalism already or new to it, that you're really eager to have a very, again, hands-on experience, very practical experience where you're going to be really out there doing journalism rather than doing research papers or essays about journalism. You're going to be doing it in multiple formats and being, held to the kind of the standards of a journalist who'd be working for a major news organization. So that's what we want to see. And so things we'll look for are curiosity, drive, interest in the kind of things reporters will be doing. So an understanding of the program and a real like, sense that this person's going to be up for the experience of going out into New York and doing the work of a journalist. So if you can convey that in the MS application, that would be great because that's what is one thing we'll be looking for is that you understand this is a very different type of program than some academic master's degrees. It really is going to be a real practical experience of going out and doing really high level journalism in multiple mediums and on different subjects as well. For a strong MS documentary or investigative or data application, I kind of went over this already about why we don't want people applying to multiple degree programs at once, is a real strong sense of why you want to focus on one of these areas. So if you're really interested in documentary filmmaking for whatever reason, even if you're new to documentaries, tell us about why that format. Why do you want to work in that field? What's really, captivating to you about making films that are reported, journalistic works, but in a cinematic format? For investigative specialization, what really is, your rationale for really wanting to dive deep into doing investigative work and exposing wrongdoing, uncovering, negligence and injustice, whatever it might be. Tell us a bit about that. And for the data program, maybe tell us about, why you want to focus on, data related reporting. What makes that appealing to you? None of these programs require that you've done that work necessarily to be a strong applicant, but we want to understand your rationale. So thinking about that will be really helpful about, if I really am applying to a specialized program, is that really the right fit and why? If it's something you already know in your heart is the right fit, that shouldn't be too hard because you can explain kind of what the motivating factor is in the essay for why you want to specialize. For a strong Master of Arts application, that's a program that does require you have a background in journalism. We'll want to see that. And it doesn't necessarily just mean the years of experience you have. If you look at our website, it usually says 3 or more years of experience in journalism. That's, often the case with applicants. Sometimes we do have some people who apply and get into the MA program who are maybe just finishing college, but we'll want to see some really complex reporting that you've done already. So if you've been very active as a college student at your campus publications and maybe had some really good internships at newspapers or magazines or local nonprofit news sites, and you can show us some really complex reported work you've done as your work samples, that would be, what we'd look for in an MA applicant, someone who can show that they do, pretty complex reporting, multi-source reporting, and want to go deeper into some subject areas with some great mentorship and do work of a higher caliber. So that's what the MA application, is about, is looking for those kind of people who can show us they know the ropes, so to speak, of doing journalism and want to do more, lengthy stories, more ambitious, complicated, nuanced stories by the time they finish the program. For a strong PhD in communications application, since that's an academic program, we'll want to have people who can show a real understanding of that program, which is very interdisciplinary and provides a lot of different kind of disciplinary focuses on the kind of study of media and society and culture. So we'll want to make sure that someone knows what the program is about and can explain why their academic interests would be well suited by the mentors that we have on the faculty in the PhD program and the resources we have at the university. So making that connection between what the faculty do here, what the resources are across the university, and what your particular research interests are is what we look for. So something that can kind of put that together as a story will be really helpful for a PhD application. A question we get often is, are there TOEFL or IELTS waivers? The answer is no. We're pretty strict about the TOEFL or IELTS. And so if you saw that, based on what I was saying earlier, that you may be eligible to be taking the TOEFL or IELTS, I would say just take that as soon as you can if you want to apply. So get that scheduled, get that done so you could have the test score provided by no later than December 15th for us. So that's something just to get on top of. So waivers are not usually granted. So I would say don't reach out to us and try to kind of appeal that. I would say just take the test when you're able to do that. And since there's 2.5 months between now and then, and I know there are some maybe at-home versions of these tests you could potentially take, hopefully it wouldn't be too much of a rush to get that done if you need to. A question if there's GRE waivers for the PhD in communications application. The answer is no for that too. So if you need to take a GRE because you are really set on applying for the PhD program, please take that GRE by no later than say December 15th as well and get those test scores to us. So again, a couple months to get that done if you need to take the GRE for the doctoral program. Question I kind of answered earlier, but I'll reiterate. What do I do with work samples in other languages? You can self-translate those and provide your own translation. Or if there's a service that does that you want to have do it, that's fine as well. But there's no like notarized or required, official translation that we need to have, as long as you feel like the translation in English seems to represent what was being said or written in the other language. That would be fine. A question that I kind of answered also earlier. Do I really need to provide a transcript for a one class summer program? Yes. So even if you took one itty bitty class and you got a grade in it, and it was many years ago and it was in some summer program, we do need that transcript when it comes to the official or the unofficial transcripts requirement. So hunt that down if you need to. You have a lot of time now, 2.5 months. If you know there's some school out there that's, has a transcript you need to, get, just reach out to them, maybe starting on Monday. Contact that school if you need to get it and you don't have it yet. Another question, can I upload and link to longer work samples than are requested? So if you have a clip of an audio file or a video file that's longer than 3 minutes and you just want to upload it, you can do that, but just be aware that the admissions committee may need to turn that off 3 or 4 minutes into it. So if your best stuff is at the beginning, that's fine. But if you do want us to listen to or watch something that's really especially powerful in your opinion, I would excerpt that particular clip and then provide that 3 minute excerpt as the sample instead of letting us just kind of watch it from the start and then turn it off at our leisure. Few more common questions. If I'm admitted to the MS program, can I request a change into a specialized program like the investigative program or the documentary program later? The answer is usually no. So if you are thinking that you're really strongly, interested in doing the investigative specialization or the documentary one, apply for that when you're applying for admission. We have the opportunity with the admissions committee to sometimes admit people to the broader MS program, even if they applied to a specialized program. So some people ask, should I apply to the MS kind of as a not to call it a backup, but kind of as kind of a follow up. Again, you can't do multiple degree program applications at once, but sometimes people will review an application for the documentary program, for instance, and say, this person is great, but it seems like their interests are more broad than just doing documentary. Like they talk about they want to do audio, they want to do writing, they want to do investigative and data work. We should admit them to the MS program. So you could apply to the doc program or the investigative program or even the data journalism program and potentially be admitted when admissions letters come out to the broader MS just by default if the admissions committee feels like someone's better suited for the MS. So if you really have your heart set on one of the specializations, apply to that at the outset, and you may get into that specialization. And in some cases, you may be admitted to the broader MS. But you can't kind of just apply to the broader MS now, and then if you're admitted to the MS, ask later after you've been admitted to change it into the investigative or the documentary program. So again, think over what your goals are, your ambitions, and decide which program is right for you, whether it's the broader one or if it's really going to be a specialized curriculum that you're looking for. Another question, can I switch if I'm admitted to, say, the full-time MS program to the part-time program or vice versa? The answer is usually just depending on the space available in those programs at that time. So admissions letters, just so people know, go out in mid-March of every year for all of our programs, so people will be notified of our decision. And if you are, in the happy instance, admitted to any of these programs, you'll have about a month and a half between mid-March and May 1st to decide if you're going to join us and commit to the school. But in that time, if you, say, are admitted to the full-time MS and you want to potentially switch to the part-time, or if you've been into the part-time and you want to switch to the MS, you can reach out to our school and we can work with you depending on space available, but it may be possible to switch people from full-time to part-time. A question that is important just to think of if you are an international applicant is why can't most international applicants apply for the part-time MS program? Now, the answer to that is because the part-time MS is for people who are usually permanent residents or U.S. citizens of the U.S. So that means that you will need to be here on not need to have a visa, basically, or you're on a work visa already working in the U.S. to do the part-time MS. People on student visas can't do the part-time MS. So that means that basically almost all international applicants go into our full-time program, which is very common. And that's where, most international students will do really great work. But the part-time program is usually, just for people who are U.S. citizens or permanent residents, and ideally for people who are already working in the New York area and want to kind of continue whatever their work is, whether it's a full-time job or a freelance thing, or they're entrepreneurs and want to do our program kind of in addition to their kind of work that they're doing already. Here's a question. In what cases should I apply to the Master of Arts program and mark that box I mentioned to be considered for the MS? I would say for the MA program, since that is looking for people with a good amount of journalism experience, if you're really interested in the MA program, you maybe want to dive deep into political reporting or arts and culture reporting, and do that at a really high level. But maybe you've only been working in journalism for a few months, or you haven't really done a lot of reporting yet, but you want to give it a shot and apply to the MA program. You can mark a box in those cases to be considered for the MS, and then that means our admissions committee could then review your application, and they may say this person is great for the MA and you could be admitted to the MA, but they might also say, yeah, they're good, but I think they could really benefit more from the MS program, which has the broad curriculum with all the fundamental training plus the chance to dive into some of those subjects that they're interested in already, whether it's arts or politics or whatever it might be. And they may admit you to the MS in that case. So if you kind of feel like maybe your experience is not quite, as deep as the MA may be looking for, but you want to really apply for it, it feels like a program that you'd like to do, I'd say you can apply to that MA program, but mark the box, and that will mean you'll need to take the writing test in addition to the rest of the materials we'll ask for the MA app. But that is pretty common. So I would say certainly, mark that box if you feel like you'd like to give the MA a shot. And an important question, we'll talk more about this in upcoming sessions, is whether would they be automatically considered for Columbia Journalism School scholarship when they submit their application for admission? And the answer for our master's applicants is no. So I know there are a lot of schools out there that maybe you just apply for admission, and then if you're admitted, you get a letter maybe sometime saying, hey, by the way, you got a scholarship of X amount. We have a good amount of funding that we give out every year to admitted students, and the master's program's around $5 or $6 million overall. So we do have a process of kind of evaluating people's eligibility for scholarship. And that is something that is done through a separate scholarship process. So this is not open quite yet. You'll be notified soon through email and through other reminders and webinars about how the CJS scholarship process works, but there'll be a separate scholarship application that will require you to do a kind of a scholarship application form from our school. You'll also do a CSS profile, which will be something that the College Board administers, where you'll upload some financial documents. And if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, we'll ask for a FAFSA as well. So this will be coming up soon, and we'll have some more information instructions coming up shortly about that. So just stay tuned for that to come out soon. But the scholarship application materials will likely be due in mid-December as well. So if you're thinking you want to apply for a master's program and you also want to be considered for financial aid from Columbia Journalism School, you'll need to do the separate app for scholarship in order to be considered for that. So just don't forget to do that. Don't put it off or kind of decide that maybe you'll just get to that, after you find out if you've been admitted. Because the bad news is for people who do put this off or think it's too much work to do the scholarship app, or they think they won't get in, and then they apply for admission, and then they're admitted in March, is then they reach out to us and be like, oh, I forgot to do the scholarship app, or I didn't think I'd get in, I didn't bother. Can I do it now? Because I'd really like a scholarship in order to potentially, go to Columbia Journalism School. Unfortunately, at that point, we aren't able to evaluate you for scholarship from our school at that point. So you need to do this before you know if you've been admitted in December. So just be sure to follow the instructions when they become available. Tune into our webinars about how to do the scholarship app process, and then make sure you get that all done on time as well. So that means if you are admitted later and you did the scholarship process, you can be considered for a wide range of scholarships that we do offer at the school. I can't, foresee exactly the amounts that anyone would be eligible for necessarily, but there's a good range of awards that are potentially available from the school that can be, from potentially a third tuition to half to three-quarters, and then some, cases as well, full tuition. But the only way to be considered is to submit all the materials that are required by the scholarship application process. That was a lot I went over, I know. I'm a little, dry-throated myself from talking so much, but I thought I'd take a little time now to take some questions from the rest of you. Just 1 second. I'm just going to turn this off here. What I'm going to do is open the chat so you can ask me some questions. I'll take about 15 minutes here to take any questions you have. As I said earlier, though, if you have a multi-pronged, many paragraph question you want to ask about your particular situation, please write to us, and I'll put that email in the chat first. That's helpful. That's apply.journalism.edu at columbia.edu, and you can write to us there, and we'll be able to answer your questions in more detail there in a way that I won't be able to because of the speed at which people are going to be putting in long questions into the chat. So if your questions is like a sentence or this 1 or 2 sentences, please put those in the chat in a moment. And you can put those to me. 1 second. I'm going to put that here. So host Great. So you can direct those questions if you have them to me. Again, keeping it short would be appreciated. Great. So here's a question about whether the personal statement and the academic statement of purpose should be kind of connected to each other. I guess this is for a doctoral application in this case. They can be different stories. They can be connected. So if your autobiographical essay touches on some of the professional or academic, ambitions you have, that would be fine. I don't think there's a strong, need to necessarily connect the essays, in a very clear way together. However, you, in a sense, think of your application to whatever program you're applying to as a story you're telling. So, there's some things you might want to emphasize in your stories that you're telling about maybe your curiosity, you're interested in storytelling, you're interested in like social or cultural issues, in kind of telling other people's stories. So if there are some sorts of kind of connections you can make, that'd be fine, but you don't have to have an explicit kind of connection between your autobiographical and your either professional or academic essay, depending on what program you're applying for. A question about magazine style samples. How would the admissions prefer to see them formatted? Oh yeah, this is a question I kind of talked about earlier about if you export, say, your magazine piece from an online site or your newspaper site and it looks kind of funky because of ads or other things about the way it looks. I've done that sometimes where I want to print something off of like a URL and I'm like, oh, that looks pretty bad. If it looks kind of bad to you, like it's a little hard to kind of parse or it comes out really like smushed, I would say please format that, like again, paste it into a Word or a Google Doc and then export it as a PDF or a Word and upload it that way. That would be helpful. If you want to say scan, if it's a magazine that's actually in print and you wanted to like scan the pages or it's easy to do that, that'd be nice to do as well if it's easy to read that way. But we know sometimes, exporting something from a website as a PDF doc can be a little messy. So I'd say just take a look at it. Look at it if it would be hard for you to read it. I would say please make a version then that's like in a Word or a PDF doc to provide for us. And if there's photos associated with it, you can include those if they came with the story. They're not required, but if you wanted to kind of paste those in, if it's helpful for the storytelling you did in that other piece, that would be great too. A question about whether there's scholarships for PhD students. Yes. So basically, I mentioned for master's applicants, you do need to do a separate scholarship process, which we'll get into in much more detail later. For doctoral applicants, there is no required application process for scholarship for that. If you're admitted to the program admits 3 people a year. And if you're admitted to that program, there is a funding package that includes tuition for the years you're in academic study and a stipend as well. So there's a standard package. So that's a difference between the doctoral program and the master's programs in terms of how financial aid would be looking. The IELTS results, I believe, and double check the website. I think it's within the last 2 years for your scores for any of those language exams in terms of the recency of that. If it's been longer than that, you may need to retake it. You can reach out to us at apply.journalism@columbia.edu if you have any question about the score dates you have for your IELTS already or for your TOEFL. Question about deferrals. That's kind of getting down the road. If you're admitted to one of our programs, master's program, and you want to defer, the answer is likely you won't be able to defer. It's a pretty strict policy in terms of what kind of things would be going on that would require a deferral. So I would say if you're thinking you really want to come to Columbia next year, if you're admitted, apply. If you have a lot of doubts about what you'd be doing next year and you want to, say, pursue some other opportunity, whether it's work, travel, another degree program, some sort of other experience, that's cool. But I would say don't apply if you really don't think you're going to be here if you're admitted next year. I would apply for the year that you think, overall you'd likely be able to come. So, again, that would be something to plan for. Don't plan to get a deferral, I would say, if you're admitted. I would say apply for the cycle that it seems likely that you'd go to the school that you're admitted for. So I would not, think about deferring right now because it's probably unlikely we would grant that just for professional reasons, other kind of life reasons. But we would encourage people, in some cases, this comes up where you're admitted to our school and for whatever reason, life happens and you can't come that year. We would just ask people to, reapply for the next cycle. We can potentially roll over some materials in those cases, but we don't offer like a full deferral for people if you aren't able to make it for the next year. A question about minimum GPA for the application. Answer for GPAs is no. There is no like number GPA that we have like a minimum for or a cutoff. So people can feel, you can apply kind of regardless of your, particular academic performance. We'll look at your academic record, of course. As I mentioned, we look at all those many transcripts you might have to provide for us or just the one you have. But we're less focused on a particular GPA. We know that some people have, for whatever reason, maybe had lower grades than they had kind of hoped for. Maybe life happened again, something came up personally, or you were in a major that turned out not to be the right fit and you found your groove a little later. That happens a lot. So we'll understand if it's like the overall GPA isn't necessarily super, stellar. But we look for, how people do in classes related to journalism, even if you've never studied journalism. So that includes classes that might be heavy on writing, communications classes, English classes, political science, history, things like that. So we'll look at kind of some of that, but we're definitely not focused on a number in the way that maybe some law schools or other types of professional schools are, where they advertise, oh, everyone here has a GPA of this or above. We're not particularly focused on that. And sometimes, the GPA is, a good barometer of how people do here. But as I mentioned, for master's applicants especially, our programs are really about going out into New York City, doing reporting, talking to strangers, using cameras and audio equipment. And like a really great GPA doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to really want to do that. So the GPA is less important, I think, than the story you tell in your essays and the materials about your motivation and your rationale for coming to the journalism school to do some really hands-on journalism here. A question about whether you can submit more than three recommendation letters. Answer is really no. I'd say identify the three that you really feel like would be the best, and then have them do the letters. Again, it's just a matter of volume for us. We can't kind of take on multiple letters per application. So if you're kind of debating on maybe who to ask for that third letter between that person and the person you might want to have as a fourth writer, maybe just think about it in terms of who you feel amongst those options out there, who has the most to say about you and your ability to do well. And even if there's four, that's a great situation. You have four people you could consider. Make a decision for whatever reason you feel like maybe you identify this person instead of the other person. It may be that they've had more recent exposure to your work. They come from a different background, whatever it is. But we ask for three letters, not more than that for the recommendation letters. Question about the work samples. Someone wanted to double check whether you're supposed to put in three writing samples and three multimedia samples for the three work samples. Answer is no. So we asked for three work samples maximum total. And those could be all three written. If you just happen to have three written samples, no worries. If you're like, oh, I've never done audio before, is that a problem? Or I don't have a video clip. Not a problem at all. If you have a few multimedia samples, you want to use those, that's fine. But we don't want you to go over three samples total. So it could be three written, two written and one multimedia, two multimedia and one written. I would say like preferably you might have one that's written just because we do so much writing here, but you could potentially do three multimedia samples if it need be for that. But there's no kind of combination that we require. But I'd say if you have a good writing sample, I probably would include that for at least one of the samples, just because it is a kind of a strong focus at the school. Um, Question about this, about what reference letters should look like if you're a recent undergrad. So if you're a recent undergrad, like or if you're in your undergraduate program now or you just graduated, again, we would ask in that case for sure that at least one of those references be an academic reference. That's kind of the policy, that it be, at least one reference from an academic if you are fewer than 5 years out of your last program. So at least one. But you could also have three professors if you want to. If those are the people that you've worked with the most closely, the most recently, totally fine. But it could also be a mix of, again, different types of backgrounds. It could be a professor for one, and two people who are your, say, your supervisor at an internship or your recent job that you've been in since you graduated, whatever that might be. So there's no right or wrong combination, but just keep in mind at least one should be an academic reference. But it won't be a problem if all three are academics, but you can mix it up. But just think again about who has the most knowledge of your ability to do well, most exposure to you, either professionally or academically, that you'd like to ask, and make those selections based on that kind of thought process. Question about is there a minimum grade requirement for the PhD program? Again, like for the master's program, no. But we will be, of course, just looking at people's academic performance. That program, as you might imagine, is a very heavily academic program with a lot of high-level research, writing, analysis in it. So we'll look at, GPAs, but we'll look mainly how people perform in classes that are probably connected to what that program is about. So that's like academic research, writing, analytical work in some discipline or another. So we'll look at that work, but we don't have a number for a GPA that we are cutting off for. Question, this is a good one. This is something that we always, see in applications. Someone's wondering, does the application have an addendum or a section where you can write about important circumstances or issues that are important to your application? Answer to that is yes, there is an area called special circumstances that's in the application. You can find that as you kind of navigate through it. And that can be either, things that you want to explain about why maybe there's a gap in your resume, why there is maybe some academic performance you feel like wasn't your best, whether it's personal circumstances, health issues, family things, other things that you were working on at the time. You can describe that for us if there's something you wanted to let us know about the circumstances that might have, affected your performance in either your professional or academic work. So that's something that we invite you to do in the app. Let's see, a question about should I fill out the work experience area in the application even if none of the experience is journalism related? Yes. So yes, if you're coming from another background and you've done work experience in some field or another, whether you've been a teacher, a doctor, you've worked at a nonprofit, you've been a financial consultant, whatever it is, tell us about that in the application. So we would ask for you to do that there. And yes, if you've worked in journalism, of course, fill that out and let us know about your journalistic work. But tell us about what other things you might have done that could be relevant to what we do here, or even if it's not, just let us know about kind of professional responsibilities you've had, either as full-time jobs or if you've had internships or other types of like fellowships, places you can let us know about that in that section too. A question about the writing test. Someone wants to know about some examples of questions that would be given in the writing test. I won't fully give that away, except for saying that, again, it's not questions where you should need to prep for it. So sometimes you might look online, and I know like a couple years ago, I Googled writing test, Columbia Journalism School, and the kind of the questions that popped up were like saying it was more of an identification test, where it says like, who is this person? What is their relevance? Tell us about that. That's not the way we do it anymore. So if you see that, that's out of date information. As I mentioned earlier about the writing test, it's going to be some open-ended questions, some scenarios, and let's ask you again how you might approach them. You can write up your kind of individual kind of thought process for that. So again, not going to be a question that you'll need to do a lot of prep for or advanced research. Um, let's see, a question about this. Someone's wondering if they have 4 years of journalism experience straight out of college, should they apply for the MS program in that case? So this is maybe is a question I imagine about whether maybe the MS or the MA might be appropriate. I think that is a couple of pronged question in terms of what you might think about. If you do have journalism experience and you're kind of deciding which program is the right fit, the MS program, as I mentioned, and the different MS programs we offer are all going to give you the fundamental kind of professional skills to do well in the field, but also the chance to kind of get a lot of exposure to other subjects or mediums that maybe are more meaningful to you, whether it's, doing sports reporting or political reporting or business reporting or whatever it might be. You can do that in the MS program and kind of customize the curriculum to kind of fit your particular interests and kind of reporting goals. If you're interested in doing the MA program, you'll need to kind of decide if you wanted to focus more strongly in one of the subject areas we offer the MA kind of concentrations in. And this year it's going to be arts and culture and politics. So if you really want to go deep, deep, deep into one of those areas and do really, compelling, ambitious work in there, then maybe that's the right fit. But the MS gives you a lot more breadth of a curriculum if you wanted to explore some other facets of the profession. And the MA is a great way to kind of get really great work experience doing deep reporting in a certain subject area. So it might just depend again on your particular ambitions. But you can also reach out to us with questions like that at apply.journalism@columbia.edu, and we can talk more about personal kind of, goals and interests and how one program or another might be the right fit for that. So that could be an offline chat for sure. A question about does the school have graduate assistance programs? I guess you're imagining like TA programs or kind of, kind of teaching helper programs to help people maybe afford the program. The answer for that for master students is no. Sometimes, there's programs out there where you can do TAing or teaching assistants to put that out there, or other types of kind of university kind of jobs to kind of supplement your income? For the most part, no. For our master's programs, they are very fast paced, and you're going to be doing reporting all over the city pretty much every day, including the weekends for the program. So that means there's not time really available to do TAing or other types of like graduate assistantships. So that would be not something you should plan on doing if you're in our master's programs. But there are other ways. We encourage you again if you're thinking about financing your degree, again, the scholarship application process and looking into maybe outside scholarship opportunities that exist maybe for people with your particular affiliations, background, to do some research and maybe apply for other ones too. That'd be my advice. But I wouldn't plan on relying on like graduate assistantships or TA-ships for the master's program. Okay, a few more questions I could take. One about applying to the investigative master's program. Does the stories that you need to provide in the work samples need to be primarily investigative? I guess if you have them, use them if they're investigative, but if you don't, that's okay. So if you've done journalism or other types of work you'd like to include and you haven't done investigative work yet, that'll be okay for the investigative app. Same for like the documentary application. If you haven't done a documentary before, we won't require that you give us a multimedia sample of a documentary to apply for that program. But again, what we'll look for especially is the essays telling us about your rationale for applying to, say, the investigative program or to the documentary program or the data program about why you're particularly seeing yourself fitting into that more focused curriculum and what appeals to you about, say, doing investigative work, even if it's something that you haven't done a great amount of yet. A question about the resume. Does it need to be two-paged? No, I'd say probably no more than 2 pages for the resume, but it could also be 1 page. That's also appreciated because it is, brevity, and we appreciate that. So if it can be concise, 1 page, that's cool. We just ask that it be probably no longer than 2 pages. You don't have to exhaustively detail everything you've done, in your life in the resume, but make sure we get the kind of clear kind of highlights you want us to know about. A question about TOEFL again. So the score that we look for the TOEFL is around 114 for that. But I would say if you have scores like, that are a bit below that, you could definitely still apply and you could be considered. I'd say it'll be a stronger application, with a higher TOEFL closer to 114, but we will consider applications. So don't, if you get 100 something, 106 or 107, I would say continue your application, get it in. If you have time, I would say maybe try to reschedule and maybe do another one and see if you can get a score that's higher. But we'll consider those apps. It wouldn't be like the end of the world if you get like a score that's a little below 114. But that is the score we're aiming to have people have. So again, you could submit an app with a bit lower score, but definitely if you have the time to take another session of that and maybe get a higher score than you have now, I would encourage that too. But it wouldn't totally disqualify an application to be a bit below 114. Um, to do. This person says this person has an article that was co-authored with another writer, and it's one of this person's best pieces of work. How can you show it in your application? As I mentioned earlier, I know this happens a lot. If it's co-bylined, please don't include that as your work sample. I'm sure it's a really great clip. So I would say include other clips that were solely written by you, but don't include the co-byline piece, even if it's something you're really proud of. However, there's a way you could potentially highlight this piece. You could talk about it in your essays and talk about if you're really wanting us to know about this work you did, whether it's an academic piece or a journalism piece. You can maybe mention it in your resume or in some of the essays you write, but we would not really want that as your work sample because we do really prefer that they be single authored pieces for both the PhD and for the master's applications. Question about the MA again, about whether we're looking for professional journalism experience, whether campus published newspapers would count for MA applications. Yes, it could. I think it will depend on kind of the work that you did at that level. So we know that we have some really ambitious, some really high level college journalists. So if you've done some complex multi-source reporting with analysis, multiple people you talk to for the stories, and you can show us that in your clips, if they're for a college publication, that would be okay. I'd say if they're like maybe single sourced, like you talked to one person and they kind of told you what happened at an event, that might not be as compelling. Maybe the MS would be more of a good fit. But if you feel like you've done some really complicated, ambitious work at the college level for your campus publications and you want to apply for the MA program, I would say certainly, don't feel discouraged from doing that. So you could apply for the MA if you can show us that kind of multi-sourced complex reporting in your college level clips. Um, let's see. How should you find out more about the scholarship opportunities for the master's program? As I mentioned, in a week or two, you'll get some emails by virtue of being part of our application system that you signed up for this webinar from, that you got emails about earlier. You'll get emails soon once we open the application for scholarship. That'll give some instructions on that. And give you kind of the deadlines and all the information about how to complete it. And we'll have webinars specifically about how to do the scholarship app. So that'll be coming soon. But if you have email account already that's signed up with us, check your inbox in the coming weeks, and we'll have more notifications about that process and how to get started with it and the key things we'll require for it. A question about whether it would be a bad decision to upload an op-ed as a sample? Not necessarily. Certainly, we'd look for reported work if you've done journalism before. But if you have an op-ed that has specifically maybe some research or some kind of, a kind of work you did to kind of bolster your opinion, whatever it might be about, that would be great. So op-eds could be something you could include. If you have multiple op-eds you've done, I'd say the ones that probably show more of, bringing in some research, whether it's you're citing studies or you're citing historical research or other information to kind of back up your opinion, that'd be great because in fact we have a opinion writing class that's often offered at Columbia, where the opinion writing is of course asked to be really supplemented with a lot of good research and kind of facts to kind of bolster your opinion. So if you already have some work like that, I would say certainly think about including that if that's something you're proud of. Okay. Um, let's see. A question about where there's no nearby GRE center. We're not able to waive the GRE application, so you may need to like locate where you can find a place to do a GRE and check out different options for being able to take that. But since there's about 2.5 months, hopefully there's time to get that situated. But the GRE for the PhD program is a pretty hard requirement. Um, a question about whether it's acceptable to not get a recommendation from a current employer because you don't want to jeopardize your current employment. Sure, that happens a lot. I know how that is. So you might be like working someplace and yeah, it's not something you're necessarily out in the open about maybe going to grad school at this time and you're kind of, thinking that's fine. So if you have a boss or supervisor and you're like, they would be a good supervisor, the good, recommender, but I don't want to maybe jeopardize that right now by having the letter asked of them, that's totally cool. So you could ask for other supervisors or academics you had in the past. That's fine. So we won't think it's like a problem if you are working somewhere right now and you didn't ask your current supervisor to do a letter. Um, let's see. Here's another question. Do we require to give the IELTS or TOEFL despite not being a native English speaker? However, you pursued your bachelor's as master's in an English language institution. Yes, for the master's applicants, even if you have studied and done English language instruction for college or above, and English is not your native language, we do ask for the TOEFL or IELTS. So it's a little bit of a strict requirement, but that is something that we've instituted for the language test this year. So that is something to, again, schedule if it seems like it is something that's suited for your particular background. Someone says, can I skip the GRE for the PhD? No. So if you don't take the GRE and you submit your application for the PhD and you don't take it, then it will be incomplete application. We won't be able to review that for the PhD program. So it would be a liability then if you don't take the GRE. So again, that's something you would need to take if you really want to be in the doctoral program here. And we don't have again, a minimum score, but you would need to have a score in the GRE for any PhD applicant that would be completed and reviewed. Good question here. I need to close in a second, but a important question. Does the requirement of financial aid affect the admissions decision? Absolutely not. So if you are applying to our master's programs and you decide you want to be considered for financial aid and do the scholarship app, you notice that there's two separate things. And the reason for that is that we don't make any admissions decisions for master's applicants with any knowledge of whether they filled out a scholarship app or what they put in the scholarship app. So financial need, financial interest, whatever that might be, has nothing to do with the application review and the actual admissions decision for any applicant. So if you have financial need that's significant, that should not affect you being considered for admission. If you have a lot of financial resources, that should not affect your decision for admission either. So financial resources in the plus or negative is not something that will affect your admissions decision. So people should not feel conscious of that as being a problem or something they should worry about when you apply for admission to the school. Let's see, one more question I can take, I think. Does this Columbia Journalism School have scholarships for international students? Yes. So anyone applying to any of our master's programs, whether you're from the US or from any country around the world, you could potentially be eligible for Columbia Journalism School scholarship if you do submit all the materials required by the scholarship application process. So don't feel like there's any disadvantage from being from any country that's not the US or being from any background that's not commonly represented here. We have a lot of scholarship that can be totally within your reach only by submitting the scholarship app, though. So don't forget to do that and making sure that it's completed when you do get the instructions for the scholarship app, making sure you get the materials in, whether you're from, again, the US, whether you're from Canada, whether you're from the UK, Brazil, China, Africa, South Africa, Zaire, wherever it might be. It doesn't matter. You can do any of those, any place around the world. As long as you submit the scholarship app materials, you can be considered for scholarship too. Let's see. Any questions that I can close with? And and for GRE, I think if there is a GRE option that is at home, you can take that too. So GRE, as long as it's done in some way or another, would be acceptable for the PhD application. But we just need to have a GRE score for that. All right, that was a lot I know to take in. So thank you so much for your questions. I will have a recording of this sent out a little later too, so you can be able to review this in more detail, along with some more information you can find on our website. And of course, we'll be having a lot more opportunities to meet with our team in the coming days, including a big webinar next week about the MS program. So please, sign up for those on our Meet With Us page, which I put into the chat right now. So you can come to any of our, online sessions. If you're in the area, come to our in-person events that are coming up soon too. And we'll have a lot of chances to hear from our faculty and alumni, in addition to team members like me, who can talk more about the nitty-gritty of the application. So again, thanks so much. Hope this was a helpful conversation. And we look forward to seeing you at more events and look forward to your applications coming in the coming months too. Thanks a lot and have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.